We get this question a lot about how long does the dark night of the soul takes. So one of the things is, before answering this question, we have to first examine why does this question arise in the first place. So there is a question before this, which is, who is experiencing the dark night of the soul? So I think um, I would read a couple of lines from the John of the Cross, which I think explains this in a more clear manner. So he says, yeah, yes, he says, the reason why the soul not only travels securely when it travels in the dark, but makes even greater progress is this. In general, the soul makes greater progress when it least thinks so. Yea, most frequently when it imagines that it is losing. Having never before experienced the present novelty which dazzles it and disturbs its former habits, it considers itself as losing rather than as gaining ground. When it sees itself lost in a place it once knew and in which it delighted, traveling by a road it knows not and in which it has no pleasure. As a traveler into strange countries goes by ways strange and untried, relying on information derived from others and not upon any knowledge of his own, it is clear that he will never reach a new country but by new ways which he knows not. And by abandoning those he knew, so in the same way the soul makes the greater progress when it travels in the dark, not knowing the way. But in as much as God Himself is here, the guide of the soul in its blindness, the soul may well exult and say, in darkness and in safety, now that it has come to a knowledge of its state. The one that is experiencing this turbulence of the dark night of the soul is the one who is tied to past identifications, to past habits, to past knowledge. It never, this entity experiencing dark night of the soul never stood alone by itself. It always lived in support of others. And when I say others, I do not just mean people. It supported itself with the comfort of ideologies, philosophies, concepts. There was always something to hold on to, something that provided security, something that provided a sense of safety. But you see now, as the crack has happened because of awakening, and this personality, this structure, this entity now does not have the strength to hold on to anything. No comfort. There are no teachers anymore. This entity tries to listen to a lot of people talking, tries to attend a lot of talks, listen to different spiritual teachers, tries to dig deep into scriptures and philosophies, tries every possible way of making sense of the depression that it is facing right now. this spiritual conflict that is experiencing, that it is experiencing so much suffering. It just wants to get rid of the suffering. So it wants to cling on to something. That's a habit. It's come from the past knowledge that try to hang on to something, and which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not discussing here from the point of view of right or wrong. This is what happens. But now there's nothing to hold on to. There are no teachings, there's no comfort. So what remains is the darkness through which this entity is crawling, not knowing when it will see the light. But there is a tremendous faith where it keeps going. You see, this entity, with all its impressions, with all its memory, with all its ideas of what should be, what should not be, where the spiritual awakening should lead me. You see, this itself is the dark night of the soul. So there is no experiencer of the dark night of the soul. The dark night and the soul are not two separate things. They are one and the same. So when this is realized, when it is understood that it is that separative system, that separative mind, which is fragmented, which is divided, that is experiencing this pain, that is relying on some external support, that is clinging on to ideas, clinging on to theories, trying to avoid the pain and suffering of the dark night, is actually prolonging the dark night through its movement. The moment it is realized that there is nothing you can do, there is no support, there is no way you can do anything to shorten this period. You totally have to face your depression. Now, I often say that, again, taking help of therapy or talking to people, all of it is fine in this process. But ultimately, you have to be aware that the one seeking help is one totally alone, totally by themselves. And that is not a weakness, it is the greatest strength. Being without options, knowing that there is nothing to cling on to, nothing to hold on to, is strength, is courage, because then it moves by itself. And that is when the dark night ends. Now, it does not mean that the suffering in life ends, that the pain in life ends. Pain is a continuous feature of life. So the pain often shows up. And again, it feels like the dark night has started again. But now there is no identification with the dark night as a separate phenomena happening from the self. It is seen that it is the self which is going through highs and lows of life. And of course, depressive episodes can happen again. And, for that, I suggest do whatever is practical. Therapy, support, taking care of yourself. Do whatever you think is possible in a given moment. But again, the fundamental question will always be posed. And the question will be, who is the one experiencing the dark night of the soul? Now, when we come down to that question, we start to see that these waves of highs and lows, they begin to subside. And one starts resting in their most natural state. Now, it does not mean, as I said earlier, it does not mean that these lows will not come again. They are a constant feature of life. Loss, separation, challenges, health, all of these things will show up. even the mental turbulence, even the psychological disturbances with all emotions will show up. Awakening does not mean that these things go away. Awakening means that the nature of these things is now seen in a different perception. It is realized that there is no one experiencing these things, but these things are arising in consciousness. So when there is an experiencer, a separate experiencer from the experience, then the experiencer says that I am experiencing dark night of the soul. But the moment it is understood that there is just darkness, but you see, without the experiencer of that darkness, there is this divine knowledge, this understanding, direct understanding that even the darkness that is perceived as something horrible by the individual, that darkness also is made up of light, because it is made visible only through the night. And sometimes, John of the Cross, in one of the poems, he says, "Oh, beautiful night." He just uh, he says, "Oh, night that guided me, oh, night sweeter than sunrise, oh, night that joined lover with beloved, lover transformed in beloved." It is through this suffering. When this suffering is totally experienced, usually what happens is we experience pain because we fight the suffering. We don't want to experience the pain of the dark night. So we say, I want this to end. This is too much. This is too painful. This is overwhelming. And those emotions are absolutely valid. But you see, they are arising because a separate experiencer is there, creating resistance to the experience. Whatever content is arising in consciousness, it is obstructing that content and saying, I do not want to feel, I do not want to experience. So, in other words, you are not giving it your total attention. You are giving it limited attention. And that limited attention is the reason for the prolonging of the dark night of the soul. When you totally embrace it, you realize that you are not. Dark night is not a separate darkness, separate from light. It is part of light only. And then things are seen in a neutral perspective with more acceptance of whatever life brings. So, those of us who are actually waiting for some magical concept or some spiritual guidance where the dark night will end will often experience that it is not ending, it just prolongs, because we are seeking, because we are fighting it. But the moment we accept, as the Buddha said, when we accept that the mud and the lotus are one unit, then there is no darkness. There is no dark night of the soul for anybody. The pain, the suffering associated with the dark night is felt in linear time only by the entity that says, I am this and that. Once you are with the presence of I am, the impersonal aspect of consciousness, there is just flowing of consciousness, but there is no dark, no light, nothing. It is all consciousness. That is when this question dissolves, not the concern with when the dark night will end. The question only dissolves.